Hello, everybody. And, if you're watching this later, hello to you as well. I'm Prachee, and today I'll be introducing you to Git and GitHub. So a bit about me. I'm off to University of Waterloo for computer engineering. I'm in the class of 2026. And currently I'm working as a learn content developer at a company called MapleSoft. There's not a lot of programming at my job right now. I mostly create training materials for different topics in maths, but I used to be a software engineering intern at a really small startup called 𝙒𝘾𝙆𝙈𝙈𝙈𝙄𝙃. And that's where I had my first experience with Git and GitHub. And let me tell you, it was a life-changing experience. Before that, whenever I used to code with someone else, we would have the worst time kind of trying to get everything to work together. And so, yeah, that's a very short experience with GitHub that I had. I've also linked my socials if you'd like to follow me, or if you have any questions, you can, reach out to me on any of those platforms. So today's agenda, I'm planning to, talk about Git and GitHub, what are the differences between them, a bit about the kind of terminology that is generally, thrown out at people, some of the important commands, show you a few resources, and then if you have any questions, you could either, ask them right now or even reach out to me later. Because it's only like a 30-minute workshop, this is by no means, meant for you to kind of code along with me, since I'll be going pretty fast paced. And if you're watching this later, feel free to slow down and see what's going on. So what is Git? Git is a free open source version control system. And a version control system essentially means that you can see all the past histories of that document. So if you've ever used Dropbox and you've, updated a file over there, you could actually see what that file looked like 2 days ago, a day ago, and then the current version. And if you wanted, you could actually switch back to it. And sometimes there's that comparison between Git and Dropbox because they have a few similar features. Like you could create, read, upload, delete files in both of them. You could view the history of the file, you could back up your code. So why do we not just use Dropbox to store all our code? Well, Git has a few extra features that makes it so much more helpful for developers. The first one is that you can compare versions of each file. So like I said, you can see what it looked like, a few days back. You could pull out that version and then compare it to your current version. You could integrate Git into your text editor. So if you're using VS Code or Atom, you could just, bring that in and help along with their process. You can collaborate with other developers. So all of you are at a hackathon right now, and if you want to collaborate with someone who's, several miles away, this is a great platform to start on. And you can also use Git platforms like GitHub. And what is GitHub? So it's kind of the last definition here, but I'm going to attack it first. GitHub is a cloud-based hosting service, and essentially it lets you manage all your Git repositories. So you've got a visual interface to work with, but when you're working with Git, it's something you download into your local computer, and you can use the command line interface to kind of work with Git. Git doesn't allow you to kind of collaborate with others. It's GitHub that actually gives you that functionality. So a few more terminology that we'll be going over. First one is directory. That just means a folder. Repository is basically the place where Git will keep all the versions of your files. So, how it looked like 2 days ago, a day ago, and current. And that's where you can access them. And then the terminal and command prompts. So like I mentioned, we'll be using Git today with the command prompt and seeing how that works. Okay. So actually, before we talk about basic commands, I want to talk a bit more about how Git manages all these version controls. And it's because the way it treats your files is almost sort of like a tree. So let's imagine you and me, we're working at a hackathon, and we want to build a site. Maybe, we want to build a site where volunteers can come and, look for volunteering opportunities. So this circle over here and every circle over here represents a snapshot of the website. So this first circle might be the starting point. We start off with some very basic HTML. It might just be, a home page, a few buttons that really do nothing, a few images here and there, some, text paragraphs, and every snapshot over here is a commit, or every node in this tree will be a commit, which is, again, just a snapshot of your website. So this one over here is going to be different from this snapshot because it might have a few extra features in it. So maybe you've now added some CSS into it, so it looks prettier. And let's say a friend approaches us and they're like, hey, I can add, some functionality into those buttons you had before. The only issue is if they're going to work on the code and you want to keep working on making your site prettier, well, how are you going to do it? And this is where it gets really helpful. So what your friend is going to do is that they're going to create a branch, and that would take you to this snapshot here. So here they're going to maybe add the JavaScript for the buttons. They're going to test a few things, and you're going to keep working on your website, and that's going to be this snapshot here. And in that snapshot, you might add a few more pages. So an about us page, a contact us page. The difference between these two snapshots is that if there are some things in this, like if there's a button that, takes you to a next page, all that code is not going to be over here. And all this code that you add over here is not going to be in this snapshot. And so it's almost like you both are working on two different codes that just started off with the same template, and now you're just taking in your own directions. And you can keep working on it. So I'm going to keep, making my about us page and everything. You're going to keep adding your buttons. And eventually, we're going to merge these two different websites that have completely different features into one. And in that one website, we have our final product. And we're going to talk about how we branch and merge, and essentially how we can do that with Git and GitHub. So a branch like this would be, in a production environment, generally reserved for features. So, there'd be hundreds of developers working. They would all make their own branches, all work on individual features, and they would branch back to this really long chain. So the longest chain is called the main branch. It's kind of like, from the beginning of the website, and then everything gets added onto this one. And then these are just kind of your side branches over here. Sometimes you might see this really short branch. These are called Hotfixes Branch sometimes. And this is generally when you've got a bug in your code, and developers kind of have to fix that immediately. So they'll branch off, once they make that change, and then they'd check to make sure everything's okay before merging it back. So just making sure if there are any questions. How Netlify works with GitHub. I'm not sure what Netlify is. So, okay, I'm gonna come back to that question, maybe do a quick search as well. So some basic commands that we're gonna try, and actually before basic commands, let's just go to the next one. There's a few more things we can talk about here. And the first one is that, like I said, GitHub is a cloud hosting service. And so basically it's on the cloud. And what you're working on sometimes is a local copy. That's what Git allows you to do. And if you want to kind of, work amongst these to each other, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be pushing and pulling. Basically, you're going to be uploading and, sorry, that should say downloading. So this way you can kind of keep a bit of you can keep the same copy and not have too many differences between them. So let's actually visit the GitHub site. So where do I have that? Right here. I'm already signed in. If you've never used GitHub before, you're going to have to make an account. And this is a completely new account. So this is what you're going to first see when you log in. Just a few things I have to notice over here. This one over here is just your profile icon. And you're going to see this thing that says create your first project. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to create a repository. So repository over here is basically your project. And it's going to ask you for repository name. So I'm going to go with, okay, hackathon test, right? And let's script everything else. We're just going to go ahead and create it. And it's going to take a while. And let's create our first file. So the first file I want to talk about, and this is a must-have for, every GitHub repository, is the readme.md. So MD stands for Markdown, and the readme file is the file that developers will first look at to kind of get an idea of what the project is about. Do they need to know anything about it? So like, what are the other dependencies they have to install? Is there, maybe some extra kind of steps they have to take? And so let's just go ahead and, write down something here. This should be super descriptive. I'm just going to put some filler text in, and you're going to see this default text here. So the default text is create readme.md. So every time you make a commit, you need to leave a message for yourself. It essentially tells you what that commit is all about. So here I'm creating a readme file. So I'm not going to change this. And once I commit it, you can see that, yeah, that file now exists. If I want to go back and edit it, I can just go ahead, click on this, and click on the edit button. And I can make this a header. So if you put a hashtag, it will become a kind of a heading. And if you had, maybe 2 of these, it would be a subheading. Yeah. And when you go back to kind of commit this change, you'll notice that it says update readme.md, which basically means that you're not creating the file anymore, you're just updating it. What you'll also notice is that it's being committed directly to the main branch. So like I mentioned before in this image, you've got the main branch, which is kind of like, your main project, and everything else is just kind of like other features you might add on to it. So if I wanted, I could say, hey, can you create me a new branch for this commit? And that is, this part where I kind of start to make a new snapshot. And if I did that, and I would propose changes, it would then ask me to leave another comment. So again, you're just leaving yourself notes to tell what you're doing over here. So I'm just going to put, again, another one and create a pull request. And now if you look at, okay, so commits, essentially over here, you can see all the commits that have been made. So here I said update readme. And okay, so if I go back to my code, you can now see that all the changes I made from before are invisible. And that's because I'm on the main branch. If I want to see the changes I just made, I have to go to the branch that had the changes in it, hello world subheading. So now you've got 2 snapshots, and you can keep editing here, and it's not going to show up on the main file. So someone else could work here. Generally, no one works on the main file. It's the place where everything merges into it and the final product. So that's a kind of short idea of GitHub. So let's try to now use Git. And what I'm going to do here is open up my command prompt. And I'm just going to go into my desktop for now. And let's say I'm going to start working on a local copy. So I'm just showing, my own code. So no one is going to see this. And again, I'm going to have hello world. So you can see that it popped up over here. And in this directory, I plan to, add all my code for the hackathon that I'm working on. So might as well just go into it. And I want to add Git into this so I can start, managing, my version controls and having files and everything on here. So to get Git into your file, all you have to do is, first of all, check if you have Git. So I do have it installed, and that's because I can see the version I have. If you're on Mac or Linux, I'm pretty sure that it's installed like in general for you. If you're on Windows, you're going to have to actually do it yourself. So the first command that you go for is git init. And it does initialize it, as it says by this message over here. And okay, so actually this folder is currently empty, so I'm going to add something in here. Okay, so this folder over here is a hidden folder, and if you go into it, there's like a lot of stuff that doesn't seem to make sense. You don't have to really play around with this, but if you can see this hidden folder over here, and you might have to, go to view and make sure you have hidden items on, it just means that Git's in your folder, and now you can use the entire kind of all the commands and etc. So I'm going to open a text document. I'm going to call this index. I'm going to add some HTML code. Once again, hello there. So it's nothing too fancy, and I'm going to save this as an HTML file actually. All right, so now I've got, a few docs, and I want to start, adding this. I want to ask Git to save these files so that if I have to look back in my version history, I can see the snapshot of this kind of the file that I had. And to do this, there are quite a few steps with Git. So in GitHub, you didn't really have to worry about much. You were directly committing changes. In Git, what you want to do is have git add HTML. And essentially what this did is it took index.html and said, okay, I'm going to add this to a staging area. Essentially, it means that, okay, this is things that I need to save, and it's one step before commit. So by adding a step before commit, instead of directly making the changes, you've got this intermediary step where you can keep making updates without making any changes to the actual main kind of file that you have. And yeah, so if I wanted to check the files that are, that are to be committed, I can click git status, and we'll be using this a lot. So the changes to be committed, you can see that index.html is here, and it also tells you the files that are not being tracked. So if I were to go back in my kind of version control history, I would not see this yet. So if you have several files that you all kind of need to go into staging, all you have to do is git add any full stop. And when you look at status, it basically adds all the files that are in the folder into staging. And then it gives this really helpful command. So if I wanted to remove any of these from staging, so pull back these changes, all I have to do is, so the command is git rm cached and then the file name. So I don't want maybe the text file to go anywhere, and it's on state. So when I look at status right now, you're not going to be able to see it. So that's pretty neat. But how do I commit? Because I know I could do that in GitHub. I want to do it here as well. So it's pretty much the same. All you're going is to git commit, and so as you saw on GitHub before, it's that you kind of always have to have these messages, and you can see that it says create readme.md. It's the same kind of principle over here. You've got to leave a message behind for yourself. So here I'm saying I created index.html, and it's been committed. Now, there's another really awkward way to go around about this. So if you went git add and then you went index.txt, which was the other file, and you just kind of went, git commit, it's going to take you to this screen. And at first, it may look like you can't type anything. It's just going to kind of move, your thing around, all you have to do is press a capital I and you go to an insert mode. So if I, said something here, you can see it being typed. And if you want to exit this screen, all you have to do is, so first of all, escape to get out of insert mode. And then as you can see at the bottom, it's a colon, a W, and a Q, and you close that folder. So I would suggest using the message one because the other one's it's not really the best kind of way to work about it. And yeah, so looking at my notes. Okay, so another interesting thing is that this over here is kind of, if I go back to here, yeah. So this repository is my repository. And let's say I want to take this into kind of, my local copy. I want to make a local copy of this thing that's on the cloud. So all you have to do is go back to your terminal, and I'm going to exit this and make a new directory. So I'm going to call this something weird again. Okay, so what I can do over here now is go for Git Clone. So clone essentially is, if you give this a link, it's going to go to that link, and it's obviously going to be a repository. It's going to look through it, and it's going to copy all of those files into your local kind of desktop. So if I went here and I clicked on code and I see, again, the clone option, copied this, and you can see that it's cloned everything. So if I were to now go and I name this file hackathon test, I've got all my copies here. And so essentially everything that was on this kind of repo is going to be over here. So if I tried, sorry. Yeah, you can see that the README file is here. And if I just checked what's in it, it's hello world. So just like in here, let's say I want to make a branch and I want to, just in my local copy, I want to work on something else. So to go about that, the command would be git branch, and yeah, and then just give it a name. So some feature. Oh, what happened? Oh, my bad. I just got confused for a second and give it the run. Okay, yeah. Okay, and if I wanted to go to this, and it switches to branch hello. So if you were to look at, if you wanted to go back, all you have to do is say main, and you're back to your the main branch. And yeah, so the last one, I just want to talk about forking, which I know we're a bit out of time here. Let's say there is a repository. So one that's really common is the view. Is it going to pop up? Yeah, so this is the repository for Vue. It's a popular JavaScript framework that you use to build interactive web applications. And let's say I kind of, wanted to make a change to this, but I don't really have permissions to kind of, make any changes to this. What you could instead do is essentially you could fork it. And that just basically means that you get to make a copy of this on your own kind of GitHub. So if I clicked over here, and it was this button right here, yeah, so it's going to take a few seconds, but it's going to copy everything that was in there and make my own repository. So yeah, so you can see that it's under my profile, and now it's, Vue. And if I wanted to go, I can, go to the README file, I can edit this and say something like, hey there, and commit changes. And now it's got my own kind of personal tag. So if you wanted to add things, or if you maybe saw some code online and you wanted to see how that works, you could bring that into your own kind of GitHub account and then try and play with it. So if you go back to this kind of thing, what's the difference between GitHub and Git really? So it's not just about the fact that GitHub is a cloud-based service and Git just helps you work with your local copies. Like I said before, in GitHub, you're writing code, you're gonna directly commit it and then make a pull request. In Git, it's you have a few more steps. So you write code, you stage the changes, that is git add, and then you're committing those changes, and then you're pushing it into the main branch. That's once you're done with, everything else. Sorry, pushing is when you're updating it to a remote server. In this case, it's generally GitHub. And as a developer, Git workflow is so much better because you get to kind of have the stage changes and you're not committing things that could potentially break your entire website. And yeah, I have a few resources. So if you wanted to install Git and you notice that Git version doesn't work for you, you can always go to @Lation's website. The other really great resource is Git documentation. So it's this one right here. It goes over all the possible code in Git and then tells you how you could use it. So Git init was one that we looked at. And if you kind of go at the bottom, they actually kind of tell you exactly how you can start a new Git repo for an existing code base. So they've got, they've got all the commands that we talked about. So it's a much easier way and to kind of see what's going on. And if you have any bugs, you can always go to Stack Overflow or even refer to the documentation to make sure that you did it right. And then there's also the Student Developer Pack. So this is a product that GitHub offers. So if you're a student and you're in a hackathon, so I'm pretty sure all of you must be, you can get this pack and you have access to so many more free resources. So for example, one that I really like is that you get to actually have free GitHub Pro, and this allows you to have more features than you already do. And if you found this to be a bit fast-paced for you, there are a few tutorials you can watch. So this one that I've linked here is from Mac. It's pretty long. I think it's about an hour. Most of them are 30 minutes, but she goes into a lot more detail. And she also tells you how to set up SSH keys. So if you're trying to connect GitHub and Git together, so your local copy and your the one that you have on GitHub, you're going to need to set that up. And for Mac, I think it's slightly few more steps than what you need for Windows and Linux. So, okay, so we're almost like at the 30-minute mark. Does Replit work with GitHub? Okay, so Replit is a online code editor. And I believe that if you go to Replit, let's see if they do have their so I'm not sure if Replit's so okay, you can connect your GitHub account, so I'm assuming that they can so you can probably use Replit and GitHub together. The only thing that is Replit is mostly used for kind of writing your own code, and GitHub would be then a place where you can take that code and store it for others to see. So I think you'll have a few Git functionalities with this. Although, if you're wondering, if you go to VS Code, it also has, your kind of functionalities with Git. If I can load this up. Okay. So if you wanted to also do this, and okay, so let's say I open the folder that I was just working on. Okay, so the one that I was on this select folder, I could open up my terminal here actually. And yeah, so I can, use the Git commands in here if you have Git initialized. Which hosters work best with GitHub and that are free? I would say I'm pretty sure most of them are free, right? So I'm not sure which ones are actually free, because but I do know that in the education pack that if you can, if you want to redeem that, they actually offer you a few hosting websites. So the one that I think is so you've got Namecheap, which offers hosting management. I think there's another one, I can't remember what it's called. Okay. Search up hosting. Okay, so there's cloud hosting. I know Namecheap was the one. Yeah, name.com is also good for web hosting. And yeah, otherwise, I'm not sure if there are other sites that offer it for free, but I know this one is. Yeah, I can upload my resources onto Discord. Yeah, so if there are no more questions, I think this is pretty much the end of the workshop. And if you have any questions about anything, I'd be more than happy to help on Discord.